Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second in our composer interview series. I am so super excited to be talking to Jerod Tate, who is a Chickasaw composer and has been commissioned by many huge orchestras. Emmy winner, has done lots of film, why can't I think of the word? Music for film. There's a better word for that. Scores. There we go. And so yeah, I'm just super excited to have him. We're going to start out. I am going to close my email so it doesn't bing like that again. We're going to start out and he's going to present some of his music, about 30 minutes or so. I'll spend a little bit of time asking him some other follow-up questions. I just spent like the last 2 days immersing myself in his music. So I'm super excited to talk about lots of things. And then we'll open up the floor for you guys to ask questions. So again, all right. So I'm going to pass the floor over to you, Jerod.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You know, before we start, actually, if you want to go ahead and pull up, just so you're ready for the first file, number one there. Chukma, Chin Chukma Taha Tak. So host for Jerod Impachachaha Tate. Chikashasaya, Talo Ikbisaya, Hashlaka Sayopa, Chukmashki, Yakoke. Hi, everyone. My name is Jerod Impachachaha Tate, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer. And I live in Oklahoma City with my son, Hiloha. My son's name, Hiloha, is the Chickasaw word for thunder. He was, his mom was pregnant with him during a very thunderous Tornado Alley year here in Oklahoma in 2013. And so he was very reactive and responsive to thunderstorms. And so we named him Thunder. So anyway, I would like to make a really important professional shout out to Charles Shadle, who's on with us here. And Charles is a composition teacher at MIT, and Charles is a citizen of the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma. And so he is a dear cousin tribe of mine. The Choctaws and Chickasaws are the same people. And so our languages are just simply small, they're dialects of each other. They're about 99% the same language. So anyway, we're very much the same people. And historically, we're both from the Mississippi area. So my tribe is part of a larger cultural region called the Muskogean region in southeastern United States. That includes the Choctaws, Chickasaws, Cherokees, Creeks, and Seminoles, and Uchis. And so that's where we're from. And then our ancestors were moved to Oklahoma in the 1830s. So that's where we call home is Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is the home to 39 federally recognized tribes. And so we're a very busy part of Indian country in this state. And I love being home. And I'm also, anyway, so I'm just really glad that Charles is here. And he's got his Santa beard. I love it. I think it's terrific. It's Choctaw Santa. So anyway, I would love to start out and play a clip for you that addresses a question that I get that I love talking about. And it's why I say what I am. But I am a Chickasaw classical composer. And of course, a natural question is like, what is a Chickasaw classical composer? And so if you're okay, Beth, I'd like you to go ahead and play this first example.
At the end of the spoken, the sung, the dreamed into life and the fire, that is when we are new and begin. The clouds rise up. The creative life has spoken through all the nights and fires, all along the sacred forest and river and stone with its own words. The telling could begin, and once it begins, it may continue. One seed, one life, one thing, one word growing after another.
All right. Thank you so much for playing that. So that's what I like to just play is hopefully that answers a lot of questions right off the bat of is the sound and the ethos that I'm focusing on. What you're hearing at what I'm singing in that is the opening call of one of our traditional songs called a garfish dance song. It's a very simple tune. It's just a very simple pentatonic tune, but I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I actually use that melody quite a bit in a lot of my works. But that's just an example of how I will transcribe that and then, of course, modernize and abstract it to my liking. That's my artistic license that I take with all that. And so what I'd like to do, though, is give you a great direct comparison and just sing you the song in its traditional form. So you heard that song, Yo Lenny. So this is the garfish dance song. Yo Lenny, yo Lenny, yo Lenny, yo Lenny. You oh, you oh, you oh. Way I only, way I only, way I only, way I only, I only, way I only, I only, way I only, only, way I only, way I only, you oh, you oh, you oh. Yo Lenny, yo Lenny, yo Lenny, yo Lenny, you oh, you oh, you oh. So that's the whole song. And so now one thing about here, I'm gonna go ahead and break some things down and get a little nerdy on you about this. Okay, so first of all, what you heard in the song was just the solo version. Generally, what we have is we have a lead singer and we have a group. And so our style of singing is very much call and response. And so the first part where you hear me saying, way I only, that's the lead singer, and then the group sings way I only, way I only, way I only, I only, way I only. So that's what happens in the social circumstance when we're singing that. And so, but like I said, it's just me, so that's my solo act. But also one thing that some of you may pick up on is that actually it's very it's major and minor mode mixed. So the call part is in the minor mode, and then the response is in a major mode. And so that's something that people have asked, like what is like kind of like the theoretical base of our folk songs. And so by and large, American Indian music is totally pentatonic and diatonic. And it switches, the different songs switch between major and minor modes, whether they're diatonic or pentatonic, they'll be in major or minor. That's something that's very, very common throughout North American Indians. And then this one happens to switch in the middle of the song, which I think is pretty cool. And so sometimes also folks will ask if there's microtonalism. And the answer to that is no. What you're hearing is basically just kind of human singing, where sometimes something is a little out of tune, and that's just the way that human singing is. And some people will, out of deep respect for trying to analyze the music, they'll be thinking they're hearing microtonalism, but that's not. It's just a little loose, So like sometimes when I'm performing it, I will end up a half step off from where I started myself because I don't have absolute pitch myself. And so I will do that even though I'm a composer. I can lose my key center as I'm singing. So that can happen. So that's just like a normal thing. And that happens in all folk music around the world, or in anybody who's not being accompanied by, a tempered instrument of some kind, so that's just a very common thing. But anyway, so that's a little bit of a cultural nerdy breakdown with that. But also you notice the percussion is a rattle percussion. And so we are known in our culture for having turtle shells as our percussion. And that's of course very different than what you hear from like the Pueblos where Beth is right now. That's very, very different, like kind of water drum sounds. The powwow drum, of course, and then, gosh, you get to Arizona and they're hitting baskets. That's their percussion. So percussion really varies a lot within Indian country. And we have a tradition of our turtle shell shaking that actually kind of covers all of the woodland area on the eastern part of the United States. Shell shaking and stomp dancing is a style of music that is very common throughout the woodlands of the United States. And as you go more south, it gets slower. And as you go north, it gets faster, to the point to where the Iroquois actually have smoke dances, which are very similar to stomp dancing, but they're so fast. Anyway, and so I asked my grandmother about that one time, and she said, it's hot in the South. So just everything is slower. So I just thought that was a terrific, pragmatic cultural statement from my grandmother. It's hot in the South. And of course, she says it in her Southern accent, Jerod, it's hot in the South. So anyway, that's just some fun. So the example that you saw there, I'd like to talk to you about the visuals a little bit. Well, this is part of a larger work called Lowak Shopala, which means fire and light. And you can find this on Spotify or YouTube and listen to this. If you search my name and Lowak Shopala, you can find the entire album and listen. It was just released a couple months ago. And so, 6 months ago. Boy, time is flying. And so, but this originally was a large work for theater and orchestra and traditional singers and dancers and classical singers and dancers. And so I'll tell you about that scene, then I'll tell you about the larger work. But that scene is called the Clans scene. And so you see the very beginning where you've got the Minko is the name of our leader or our chief, is calling the clan leaders together for a council meeting. And so what you see is depictions of what our clans used to dress as probably 2,000 years ago. That's Margaret Wheeler. She's our very acclaimed Chickasaw textile artist, and she was recreating very accurate representations of our old outfits of what clan leaders would look like then. And so, our clans are named after animals. So I am from the Shawnee clan, which is the raccoon clan. And Charles, do you happen to know your family's clan by any chance? Okay, that's okay. We don't all have this. It was fragmented over time. And so, but we have like Deer Clan and Alligator Clan and Bird Clan. And so they're all animal clans. So this was kind of like a theatric runway show in which each clan would come out in their outfits slowly to the section of music, which is about 3 minutes each. It was like an ancient fashion runway show that was just really, really cool to do. And so Margaret it's a really powerful scene. And we've played it with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic here as well. And they also did it in Winnipeg. And I just love it when people are able to experience our ancient outfits along with this modernized orchestral presentation. It feels very cinematic to me and very theatric. And so anyway, that's what that work is about. And Lowak Shopala, the larger work, is 8 different scenes that represent different aspects of Chickasaw history and culture. That clan scene is one of them. And so anyway, so if you have time to check that out, I do encourage you to check it out. And I say this because, I don't make money off albums anyway, so it doesn't matter. But YouTube music is free, I believe, and it's on YouTube Music. And so I think people can access that quite easily. And I like that. So I feel very fortunate that we can stream like that. So anyway, that's what that larger work is about. A little bit about myself. My father is Chickasaw Indian. His name is Charles, and Dad lives in Ardmore. And my father professionally is a tribal judge and lawyer, graduated University of Oklahoma Law School. But my dad is a classically trained pianist and baritone. And so I grew up with my Chickasaw father playing class and singing classical repertoire in the house on a regular basis. And that's how I became interested in piano. And so, in fact, this is a really cool story. My dad used to gig restaurants playing the accordion and singing arias. And so here's this Chickasaw kid playing accordion and singing classical arias. That you want to talk about a stereotype breaker. It's just wonderful. But Oklahoma is home to a lot of classical training in the fine arts from many, many tribal members historically. I mean, we're talking our visual fine arts go back 150 years here in the state, and it's its own world genre. It's why people from all over the world go to Santa Fe Indian Market anymore, is because our genre of North American Indian art is very intense and very, very deep. And so there was actually a lot of classical training that happened. In fact, we have like our 5 very famous Indian ballerinas that came from that time. And Maria Tall Chief is very famous, and she was Balanchine's wife and danced Firebird worldwide, and she was very famous for that. That's a really good example. There's a lot of visual artists. There was the symphonic composers like Charles and I are from Oklahoma, and so there's just a lot of tradition in the fine arts that I'm quite proud of. And so that's a little bit of perspective on Oklahoma history. I want to play another example of something, and this is not my work. This is one of my students' work. But one thing I've been very blessed with is teaching American Indian kids, not just also non-Indian kids, and also older people as well. My oldest student one time was 75 years old, Dr. Jordan Tang, who is an Alzheimer research PhD scientist here from the University of Oklahoma. And so anyway, I've had the pleasure of teaching many folks, but I focused on American Indian kids. And so I had the pleasure of starting my teaching career with Indian kids in Arizona at the Grand Canyon Music Festival. And I'd like to play a work by a kid named David Johnson. This piece is called How the River Flows. And this was David's, he was a guitar player. This was his very first composition, and this is for string quartet. I just found this piece very beautiful and very compelling. And so if we could pull that up, that'd be great. That's so great. I'm so proud of those kids. So, one thing I really enjoy about playing these excerpts is, again, these are stereotype breakers, and this is really important for me to talk about in my teaching. So Native kids they live in the year 2021, and they're plugged into the internet just like everybody is around the world. I mean, this was back in 2005, and they were plugged in just as much. And that was a time where there's a lot of dark metal going on, and so there's a lot of that sound in their music. And one thing I'm really clear with my students about what I do. Like, I'm very, I guess, Bartokian in the sense that I transcribe my folk music. I'm very deliberate about using it in a very specific way. And I'm inspired by folks like Toru Takemitsu, who just made his music so Japanese, and I'm looking for the same symphonic ethos in my music. And so I'm really clear about this for me. But when I play this and I let the kids know what I'm doing, and I'm very happy to help them with that, but I make it really, really clear that I have zero stylistic restrictions in my teaching. What's really important is to recognize that these kids are of their own time, and their knowledge of music is really quite phenomenal, and their experiences and their exposure to the world, they're world citizens. And they have their own very specific, beautiful experience of the universe. And they're just these walking spheres of experience. And I want to make sure that they feel extremely authentic to who they are at that time in their lives. And so my job as a teacher is to be their living encyclopedia for any and all answers they need to achieve what they want to achieve, or compositionally. So what at each kid, I take exactly who they are, and my goal is to make sure that they are achieving the highest artistry that they can in whatever expression they choose to do. I mean, look, we've got Indian painters who look like Jackson Pollock. I mean, it's like, and some who look very, very clear in their iconography. It just, the variance within visual art is just massive in Indian country. And so I encourage kids to feel the same way as composers. And that's a really, really good example. But at the same time, this kid couldn't help but being elemental about this river and this sound. I mean, the way he had three strings playing the same thing with different, and that echoey wave that he had in the sound, that was his. He totally invented that. And I was like, man, why didn't I ever think of that? It was really inspiring. But I mean, these kids, I mean, that's when people are given, opportunity and access, it happens. And I mean, human beings are born brilliant, beautiful, and well. And then this shows up when we give them artistic access to express themselves entirely authentically. So I get really excited talking about that, and I love sharing that with the public. So we're already running out of time. I would love to take questions if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, we can definitely do questions. I'm also, Jerod, I'm just happy to let you talk longer. I'm loving it.
Well, so let's go ahead. I mean, it's been a good 25 minutes. So let's go ahead and take some questions, because that will create something. And did you have any that were submitted or anything, or?
No, I was like, if nobody comes up with questions, I'll go to my list.
Oh, good.
Okay. I talked about, I'll actually, so one of the things that I notice in your work, and a lot of them, is sort of this, that I also feel from what I've learned, is important in a lot of, it's important in a lot of folk cultures, but also American Indian cultures, is like this creating a sense of community through music. And I felt like your music really did that in a really amazing way. Is that something that you consciously think about? And it just, I don't know, any comments on that?
Absolutely. Yes. And I appreciate that. And, if I may, I would say, okay, one part of my family I failed to mention was my mother. My mother, Patricia, was Manx Irish. And so I'm Manx and Chickasaw. And my mother was a professional choreographer and dancer. So between my parents met in the theater. I grew up with an enormous amount of theater, opera, modern dance, ballet in my life. And in particular, my heroes were American trailblazers in dance, like Martha Graham and Ruth St. Denis and Ted Shawn and Isadora Duncan and Agnes DeMille, Bob Fosse, Alvin Ailey, Jerome Robbins. I mean, these folks were like part of my regular life. And I mean, my mom choreographed all the major Stravinsky ballets. She was the one who did the first live performance of Soldier's Tale I was just a kid. And so and Prokofiev was his ballets are just incredible. And of course, Tchaikovsky, but all of that storytelling and legendary ethnic identity and nationalism that was just saturated all of their works. And the American dancers they were absolutely trailblazing an American sensibility. I mean, when you look at Chusang-Go's configurations, he choreographed Samuel Barber's piano concerto. Sam Barber had no idea his piano concerto was going to be choreographed. And here's got Baryshnikov dancing to his music. I mean, it's that this type of American groundbreaking stuff was really encouraging to me. But I saw a very big parallel to Greek culture, ancient Greek culture, which actually is so influential to our classical music. And it's not Western, by the way. So when you say Western classical, there's not one time zone for classical music. It was a massive part of the world that actually conglomerated into what we have as classical fine art. So there's a lot of history behind it. So, but I say all this because I think like this. I think in very world universal terms. I'm a very big, I'm very influenced by Joseph Campbell, who talks about the universal hero story that Star Wars is based on, and all great legends and tales are based on. It aligns with American Indian legends and storytelling so well. And that sense of community, honestly, is ancient to American Indians, and it's also ancient to the world. It really is. There is all ancient music and art is integrated, all of it, all over the world. And so I just feel like I'm getting back to basic humanity through an American Indian lens. It's just, I love that. And I love that there's room for everybody. It's not exclusionary. It actually reminds us, all of us, of where we come from in our ancient past. We all come from ancient cultures, and that has ancient folk music and ancient folk art, everything. So like when people are making like gorgeous designs like this 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, somebody came up, it was modern art at the time, right? Somebody was coming up with a new notch that went around the side of the shell, and it shook the entire community. They, oh, wow, they're changing our tradition. And I mean, there was modern stuff, and people would have different feelings about it, and positive or negative, whatever it was, but there was discussion, and somebody would start imitating and riff off that and start something else. This was happening all of the time, and that's part of our ancient culture. So anyway, so yes, I do think about the community, and I do think as an American Indian, I want tribal members to recognize melodies in this stuff, in the storytelling. I want them to remember the story that, oh yeah, that's our shell shaker story, or that's this story. Or when I'm writing in different American Indian languages, that tribal community understands the music that's up on their stage. So when they hear their language presented on a theatric concert stage, I want that to impact them as a community and feel like they are world people, like they're part of the universe. You know what I mean? It's like that their relevance is amplified on the concert stage. And so, yes, I'm constantly thinking when I'm writing, I'm thinking about the people who are going to hear this, and that steers how I write, because I want a certain affect and ethos again, that kind of thing. So by all means, I'm thinking of community. But artists are today and in the past. I mean, I think everybody's always predicting their relationship with somebody they haven't met yet, that's either going to view their art or hear their art. We're always anticipating our future relationships with more and more people. It's cool.
Yeah. That actually reminds me, that leads into another question that I had, which was, when you have worked with other American Indian languages, did you work with members of the tribe? Like, how did you learn about the languages and the stories and
Yes.
not to integrate them?
Yes. Well, in all kinds of ways. I mean, first of all, I have friends in all kinds of tribes. And so I will always contact somebody that I know and say, hey, got this idea. I want to start bouncing off you. And who do I talk to in the community? Because I don't speak Lakota, I don't speak Ponca, I don't speak Zuni, so it's like, I will always find a way to become in contact. And this is, projects are always years in advance. So there's always research and contact to be made. But the whole point is to establish a relationship and talk about it. First of all, make sure everything is right, is cool. Even though I consider the tribes in North America my cousins, we are from very different cultures. And so we have both a monolithic feeling and a very diverse feeling at the exact same time. And so monolithically, I have lots of encouragement, or passion to express for American Indians. And I also have a respect that I'm not from all these other cultures. And so it's both. So I go in with great passion and confidence and enthusiasm, and I just start talking to people and finding guidance. A lot of the because I eventually have to translate things. And so I always need somebody from the community who feels comfortable translating in a modern style and is able to, and everything has always worked out really well. But that's just because it just takes time and relationship and contact and talking and, working things out. And so that's how I manage that.
Again, slightly related was, so like in your work, Fire and Light, you like, and in several of your other works, you use like traditional Chickasaw singers. And I was wondering, you talked a little bit about how you adapted like the melody, the original melody into like the Western orchestral idiom. And I was wondering how, sort of like the technical aspect, like how did you get the Chickasaw singers to work with the orchestra? Was there any challenges in that, or was it like, oh, they're just awesome and they just did it perfect?
It's if you've raised children, just kidding. No, basically I'm an enthusiastic parent. And so what I'm doing, and I'm not calling people I didn't mean to imply I was calling anybody children, but what I'm saying is like I'm rounding people up for a vision. I mean, look, we're all humans. And so all it takes is really, just clear communication. And so if I'm going to be apprised of some kind of an engineering project, I'm not an engineer by profession, but if somebody is a really good ringleader in communicating what's happening and helping me participate, it's just about really thinking through in your communication. So like, for instance, in this particular piece, Loak Shopla, it is bookended by our double header dance. And so that is a literal, I have the double header literally performed by the dance troupe, and I orchestrate, and the orchestra is timed out to where it times out with all of the correct counts of the traditional dance itself, and the orchestra. So it's all aligned. So I do that. I know the song and the dance. I orchestrate literally it's almost like a theme and variations, because the dance repeats itself and the orchestra keeps building and building each iteration of the song. And what I do is I'm conducting the orchestra and watching the dancers, and I make sure that if something gets off, I'll bring it back in together, that kind of thing. But what I do is I remember the first rehearsal, I was just like, all right, we just got to ugly through it and just try it. And so I just said, all right, guys, just start singing. The orchestra's going to come in and it's going to be distracting, but you just try to hold your fort there. You guys hold it and I will help, and then we'll trip and we'll start it over again. And so it's like I'm teaching them a new sports game or something like that. Like, here's the basic rules. Let's give it a try. Here, I'll help you get back on your feet, that kind of thing. And within a 3-hour rehearsal, they had it. And it was like, and it all made total sense, so it's just my responsibility to make sure that I'm communicating very, very well with all parties involved, and no, I don't see anybody as like better or worse, or it's just some people have this type of information in their lives and some have this. I happen to know both. So it's my duty is to communicate that as clearly as possible. And I'll make mistakes too. I'll be like, oh, that's right, I meant to say it like this. So it's I really enjoy the risk. But again, it's like, we're all people. We're going to get it. It's just a matter of clear communication.
Yeah, I loved that. The double header section of that piece is like my favorite part of that whole piece. I just loved it. And
oh, thanks.
guys, if you didn't notice, I did put a link in the chat to that whole piece.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a really good example of a straight up orchestrated traditional dance, and that's in the dance, and it's totally in its original form, and I just completely orchestrated it.
Yeah,
so
it's really cool. I don't know how some of it I was like, because the orchestral instruments play the melody along with the singers, so that seems like it was a challenge. It would be a challenge to get together. It was really great.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, Stan.
My name is Stan, and I'm a composer in New Jersey. My understanding is that you do combine Western music with the Indian music. Is that correct?
Yep.
In your own composition. And I wanted to ask you, number one, which Western composers have influenced you, and what is your process once when you're composing a piece of a mixture of Indian and Western type of music? What is your process? Is it very do you have a plan in advance? Does it just come out as you go? Is there a methodology for combining these two types of music that you have?
Absolutely. I love this question. So basically, I mean, I'm influenced and inspired by many composers, because historically, composers were imbuing their ethnicity and national identity into classical music. And that's the thing I love about the classical fine arts, is that traditionally they came from kind of a certain area, but as it's almost like this cloud of joy that will move over different groups and countries, and it asks everybody to bring in their identity with a very specific discipline, almost like the martial arts. The martial arts are a set discipline, and anybody can practice the martial arts and participate. And every time they do, there's always a little bit of human variance that comes in with that. But the discipline is still the same. But like, for instance, we teach the martial arts in the Chickasaw language. So we've adapted it like that to where people will learn the language at the same time they're learning the commands, and they're still learning the same discipline, and they're finding parallels to old Chickasaw disciplines. So I'm just giving that as a general human example. But so I'm influenced by composers who've done that, and Debussy is a fantastic example. You couldn't be more French than Debussy. You can't be more Russian than Tchaikovsky or Prokofiev. You can't be more Hungarian than Bartok, more German than Beethoven, more Japanese than Toru Takemitsu, Cambodian as Chinnery Ung. I mean, all of these ethnic identities are so strong in the classical fine arts, and it works. And we were all doing very much the same thing. I will transcribe tunes like Bartok did very deliberately of his own folk music. He was transcribing stuff, and then I will absolutely let that dictate certain sounds. I will then experiment based on the classical training that I've received. I'll take risks. I will expand it myself based on just impulse. But every time I start a project, I generally decide I'd like to pick tunes that I feel are relevant to it. I'll transcribe them and I'll start to mess with them. Like, I can augment or diminish intervals within the melody to create chromaticism. I can augment and diminish rhythm lengths, so that something can become elongated rhythmically or shortened rhythmically into units. So then I can be inspired by Beethoven's Fifth Symphony of taking the smallest unit and making it, the basis, the germ for something larger. Or there can be larger melodies that go on for a long time and have slight influences, kind of like Debussy did, a little more rhapsodic in that sense. So there's been so much composition before me in so many ways, but it's also the same in Indian country. Indians are still creating new melodies in the old styles, and sometimes those are influenced by either pop music or classical music or jazz. This is happening in both directions all the time, and I see that and I hear that, and I'm influenced by what my contemporary native folks are doing within traditional music, like folk music, and I see I sometimes I'll be inspired by how they're evolving our folk music. And that will inspire how I'm evolving in my classical composing. So, I mean, it's really fluid, super, super fluid on what's inspiring and influencing. But I have my technical things where I'm transcribing in a certain way. I will mess with things. I do create a prime, inversion, retrograde, and retrograde inversion of every melody that I transcribe. I do that instantly, so that I just immediately am feeling expansive, I guess, like it's helping me expand the melody and the ideas, and I can get counter melodies that work or whatever. And sometimes, and generally, the retrograde inversion turns out to be my other melody for some reason. I'm not sure if it's been consistent. Retrograde inversion is always another compelling melody as much as I like the original melody. And it's just, I don't know, it's worked out that way. I don't know. But that's my, but see, that's part of my classical training that I'm applying. But then I just allow myself just to be who I am, and just to be impulsive. So it's all of the above, Stan. Really, it is, and then some, hopefully.
Anybody else have any questions yet?
I do, sort of.
Oh, Kristen.
Hi.
Hi.
My question for you has to do with you say you write for voice, or taking from the voice and writing for orchestral instruments. Do you find any difficulties in taking other folk instruments and making them idiomatic for orchestral Western orchestral music or instruments?
That's a very, very good question. Vocal and percussion, to me, is the easiest and most natural to do that with. I have been asked if I would incorporate native flute, and I have, Northern Plains flute. First of all, it's not actually from my own tribe, and so I don't have like Northern Plains flutes here that I play. I just don't play the flute. So, but I have incorporated the Plains flute. Like for Carlos Nakai, I wrote a woodwind quintet for him, and I was really happy to do that. I felt ready at the time because, I mean, quite honestly, with a native flute, it doesn't have the same facility as, say, a flute. I mean, it is. I would say the technically the slowest instrument to play, in terms of floored passages or anything like that, and so it's just not as readily technically capable as some of the other instruments, and so it was a challenge. It's like, well, what do I do? And so there's so many questions that I had for myself about, how do I make it part of the ensemble and feel as natural as possible, and then sometimes lean into its simplicity. I mean, you don't have to avoid it. But I was looking for a wide variety of treatments. But I will say this: I based that wide variety on that flute itself. I allowed myself to be inspired by like what would be considered possible limitations, maybe. But I would look at those as opportunities to exploit that particular aspect of it and to augment it or amplify it. So like if you have a melody that's nice and slow and beautiful on the flute, well, how could I make that a unison with the other winds, or how could I frame it in a way that's so beautiful and unique to woodwinds? You know what I mean? It's like I would lean into those things, those aspects of it, and find just different solutions. It was really a great. I really enjoyed writing that work. I really did. And just the whole world it opened up of challenge. Stravinsky said something that a lot of composers are familiar with, and that is he felt better when he had more restrictions placed on him in a work. And when I say restrictions, they're not just more parameters, I guess, guidelines put on a piece, because he just felt that he could actually be even more creative. He felt free somehow by having some limitations and some parameters built in. And so I kind of felt the same way. Suddenly I had all these ideas that I didn't realize I would have, with all the issues that come with that Northern Plains flute, as opposed, then working that into a woodwind quintet and making it sound completely integral to the ensemble. So yes, that's challenging. So I think it's challenging with anytime you mix instruments of two different cultures. That's just what happens, Except I will say, vocally and percussion wise, I think that's the easier place for me, at least. And I feel like I've witnessed that vocally there seems to bridge a little quicker, I guess, maybe. And the same thing with percussion.
Thank you. That's interesting.
Anyone else? Do you want to cut anyone out? I had another question about, I've noticed you've done actually a lot of writing for young ensembles, like a children's choir, or you had the Choke Fee for the, I just watched that, and it was, I really like that piece. Also, I'm like, if it starts out with big drums, I'm just like, okay, I'm sold. But how do you feel? I feel like a lot of, how might I put it? Like a lot of people in the Western music world feel that writing for children is like, lower, or like, I don't feel that way. But yeah. I've had some people, I have also written for like, kids ensembles, and had a professor that's like, oh, are you going to write for toddlers next? And I was like, well, why not? Yeah. I just like, how's your experience with that? I thought your pieces like that, they were perfect for the ensemble, and they were still fun. Yeah,
I really appreciate that. Choke Fee was really fun for me, because I actually it was written for the Oklahoma Youth Orchestras, and the age range of that ensemble was about 12 to 16. We brought in a couple percussionists from the Oklahoma City Philharmonic to enhance that, but the strings were all kids. And so, I mean, I went in very deliberately, pedagogically, going, okay, I would really love to introduce a lot of these things that I like to do in my orchestral works to these kids, but I also got to conduct it, which was really helpful because again, it's like I'm just like a teacher. I could go and say, all right, it's actually a lot easier than you think. So here's the idea. And I'll just be like, all right, so now try this. And I got to do that. And as a composer, I think it's really important to be able to have that contact time. So if number one is the mystery is taken away, like I'm just as human like you are, and I love music and it's fun and this is fun. And so these are all fun things to do. So instead of looking at it as a difficult, modern technique, well, these are colors and just this makes your instrument sound really cool. So the cool factor is actually really important. That word cool is actually a really important word to humans because it's cool. If something's cool, Duke Ellington said, if it sounds good, it is good. And so that I love that attitude, and he opens that parameters for people just to simply enjoy. Well, I felt the same way about opening up their instruments so they enjoyed their new sounds going, oh, I really like doing that. That's kind of cool. So I really leaned into that. And of course, as a teacher, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to push them. And I did. But the fact that I was able to coach them and really humanize the learning environment, that was, and demystify it, just make it really experiential with the composer who wrote it for them. That was a real advantage and an opportunity for me to do that. And fortunately, that piece really has stuck with a lot of ensembles. But I tell you, because I knew, see, you're talking about the relationship parts. Like I anticipated all that as I was writing it. Of course, I picked the rabbit, Chuk Fi, which is our trickster character. And the rabbit is undetermined. It's like when you see a rabbit darting around. And so it just inspired me to do all these kinds of, whatever thingies, rabbit-like stuff and just have fun with it. And I was able to tell the kids, this is the rabbit doing this. Now the rabbit's who do this. That was really a fun part about it as well. So but that stuff, kids just kind of open up. I feel artistically totally uninhibited around kids because I just feel like, it just makes me feel like I did when I was a kid. When I was learning piano repertoire, I thought certain things were just so cool. And also being around ballet and listening to orchestrations and listening to Peter and the Wolf and Soldier's Tale, I mean, that's just neat. It's really neat storytelling. And I love bringing that just fun discovery thing to kids and again, it's like I see children as just the same. We're born with full emotions and we are ourselves. We are us when we're born. So I try to that's how I feel about kids. They're people and they're awesome people and there's so much opportunity to give them a positive experience and have fun with it. I just love that. I had some very good experiences like that when I was a kid. I like to impart that onto kids too and adults. I speak the same language when whatever ensemble I'm working with. This is how I talk.
I was wondering if you would like to tell us a little bit about your project that you're doing with Tien, who is our former conductor in residence for BNMI. Would you like?
Yes, I forgot about that. Tien Hui Ung. He is a conductor over at Mount Holyoke College at the University of Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst 5 college system. That's a long thing. So anyway, he's out there, and they commission a new opera pretty much every couple of years, 1 or 2 years, and so I hit his radar, and he commissioned me for a work that I was already anticipating doing. This is a new opera that's entirely in the Chickasaw language called Shell Shaker. And we have, of course, an origin legend of how we received our turtle rattles. And it's a beautiful, the version that there's different versions depending on the tribe or the family even. And this particular version, I think is just absolutely beautiful. And it's a hero's tale about a young girl who is struggling to find herself and her place in her tribe. And she is sent on a mission into the forest, and she goes out into mysterious land. It's a typical thing. It's like everybody goes to the forest to have an otherworldly experience and come back, a more developed person. Well, she does the same thing, and she comes back with culture, living in the woodlands, and the music. She completely transforms our music by adding the shell shaking. Our shell shakers are generally worn in bundles around the lower leg of women, and they shuffle, and they create a 16th note shuffle as they're dancing. It's called stomp dancing. So chicka 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 like that. And the women play our percussion. in our stomp dances, and the lead singer will do the call. The whole community does a response, and the women are doing the percussion. And it's only women that can do the shell shaking. And so this was the story about how she brought that shell shaking to the women of the community, and how she completely transformed our music and then brought all this cultural knowledge to our people. It's a great story. It's like the unlikely hero, somebody who appears to be, an outcast at the beginning and turns out to be the hero of the community at the end. And it's really a wonderful, perfect 2-act opera. It's just fabulous. So that's what this is about. It's called Shell Shaker. And that is premiering this coming fall. It was going to be in the spring, but we delayed it for artistic reasons. There's some more work that I wanted to be able to do, and it's actually going to be a little longer than we had anticipated. So we're going to premiere that in Springfield in the fall. So, and it is saturated. Do I say replete with Chickasaw and Choctaw and Creek melodies and Cherokee? There's a little bit of Cherokee in there, so it's got a lot of just all the southeastern tribes kind of represented in there, but it's just completely saturated with our melodies. And I allowed myself to be very, very romantic in this opera. So
cool. Let me see. Anybody?
Oh, I added a small love interest. There's a boy who's secretly in love with her, and when she comes back, they're both grown up, and he's the lead singer, and she comes in and adds the shell shaking, and it's just that was my little romantic part. Gotta have that.
It has to have that.
Gotta have the secret love.
Does anyone else have questions? Oh.
I appreciate you all hanging in.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed, my last question, I noticed you're doing a commission with Roomful of Teeth. I don't know if you wanted to, that sounds amazing, because they're amazing.
Yes, that is something I'm going to also lean in very, very heavily into the shell shaking aspects. I'm doing kind of like a theme and variations type of thing with them. I mean, they are colorful, to say the least. I mean, they have so much color ability and texture ability in their own singing, and so I really want to lean into that. And so I'm creating a piece that's based in shell shaking. That's like I said, kind of like a theme and variations on that, and where it just really digs into what they're capable of and completely melding that again, like with what I consider the ethos of my tribe. I want them to. I'm exploiting them. I'm using their capabilities to my advantage. So,
yeah,
and not just it's not just that. I mean, but there's also, it's not just like all effects, but I'm talking about like very trained singing. I'm gonna really pull it out of them. So it's been really, didn't mean that.
Yeah, no, it almost seems almost scary, because they're just capable of like anything, which you said sometimes having too much choices is scary, but yeah.
Well, in this case, I'm going to be a kid in a candy shop, and I'm just going to go for it. I mean, I'll try to make it anyway. So I will have all the inner conversations with myself that I'll need to, and come up with a piece. So yeah, so we're working on that now.
Well, all right. Well, all right. Last call for questions. Right. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us your wonderful music and your wit and wisdom. It was great to chat with you today.
Well, I sure appreciate this. I'll tell you, this is such a silver lining for me. I love that I can meet with people that I wouldn't normally be able to meet with because of our technology. This is a blessing here, and I'm very grateful that y'all are spending time listening to me just blab, and I'd see that everybody's staying awake. That's nice. And Dr. Shadle, we're going to have to get together on Zoom again with your class sometime soon and do some more. I got some more I could play for your kids, so.
Excellent.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks again. I'll send out, I'll just message a couple things. We have the next Salon series where composers can share their music is coming up. Is going to be February 9th at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then our next composer interview series is going to be with Ingrid Stutzel on March 9th at 3 p.m. So both of those are on our website if you want to join us. And that's all of my plugs and just all the thanks.
Thanks. All right, y'all have a great evening and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Bye.